Christ is risen.
Indeed, he is risen.
Greetings and welcome to this edition of the St. Nicholas Thursday Evening Lecture Series. And before proceeding, I would like to take a moment for us to thank Father Miran for organizing these talks for us, finding interesting speakers. So let's just take a moment to show our appreciation. Of the year, and we've got many more to go, and Father, I know, probably has some very interesting topics to prepare for us and to present speakers for our learning and enjoyment. So tonight we are happy to welcome back as our speaker Father Marek Wisnowski, pastor of the Church of St. Emilian in Brunswick, Ohio. Father Marek is a renowned iconographer whose windows into heaven can be found not only in our Church of St. Nicholas, but in many churches and homes in many countries. Currently, we are in the Easter, or season of Pascha. So, this evening, Father Marek will speak to us about the resurrection icon, the descent into Hades. Please join me in welcoming Father Marek.
We'll sing the Troparion, the resurrection Troparion. I don't know who's camping.
Christ is risen from the dead. I have trampled death, and to those in the tombs he granted life. Oh, those was
that God was kind of concerned about people that he heard that people were misbehaving on earth. And he decided to send one of his angels down to earth. And he says, listen, I heard that 95% of people are misbehaving, 5% are still good. Go and check it out. So the angel goes down. This is a joke, by the way. So one of the angels goes down, and after about 3 months, he comes back and he makes a report, and he says, God, you were right. 95% of people are misbehaving, 5% are still good. And God said, you know what, I better get a second opinion. So he sent a second angel down to earth. So there he goes, and after 3 months or so, the second angel comes back to heaven and he says, you know what, God, you were right. 95% of people are very bad, 5% of people are still good. So God says, you know what, I better send an email to those 5% of people who are still good, just to encourage them. And just, because it's a hard time, so they don't get off the road or, off path. And would you know what the email says?
What?
You didn't get the email?
Okay.
I see that Father Gideon has a lot of work to do.
We keep him very busy.
I didn't get any email either. I thought that, they start on the funny side because, I'm always nervous, before talking. So, but here we go, talking about the icon of the resurrection. But I'd like to start with something that is called a myth or legend. A myth that means legend. I think that's from the Greek word. But anyhow, there is so many myths and so many legends, and it's a numerous number. A lot of these myths and legends going on. And how did they start? It's I may not be correct on that, but going way back, people were always wandering and always fighting with evil powers, or always fighting with nature and always fighting with each other. And as they were in those battles, they were sort of hoping for something better on the other side, after this life. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, we go through the struggle, but then we're hoping for something good, for harmony, for love, and that's how all these myths and legends and whatever started. We're looking for something good, right? And one of the myths, there's a lot of them, but just a little example, and it's from China. And the name of the person was De Tong. Doesn't matter, right? De Tong. But when he was born, what happened was that he was captured by 360 devils, and he was taken to the center of the earth. But then, what happened was that those devils, because they thought that he's going to come out, they thought that he is, going to free himself. So they put him into the big pot of boiling oil. That's just a legend, all right? Big pot of boiling oil. For 3 days they were boiling him there, put a heavy lid. And after 3 days, the top was actually unharmed. And it was brought back to earth, from the center of the earth. And they believe that those devils or evil powers kind of helped him to be like a strong person. And he was like the sign of something strong, that he wasn't dead and now he's alive, and people were looking for some kind of hero like that. And it's a myth, it's a legend. Should we believe it or not? If we think about the resurrection, we could think that way too. Is it only a myth or a legend, the resurrection of Christ? Or is it a reality? We could think both ways. But what I want to tell you is that this is actually the reality, the resurrection of Christ. And why do we say that? Or why do I believe in that? Because the Old Testament announces this coming. And then in the New Testament, we have so many witnesses of the resurrection. And it's not a legend anymore, and I'll talk about it later more, but I believe it's not a legend. It's not a myth. It's not something that is made up. It's a reality. And I'll start to go back now, and I'm going to go back to Adam. Adam, the first creation. I brought the icon of creating of Adam. You know who Adam was, right? So here we go. Here is the icon or mosaic of Adam, or the creation of Adam. And just to let you know, what Adam means is Adama is a breath, and D-A-M, dam. I don't want to say damn, but as blood. And what you can see here on this icon, the creation of Adam, is those two people. It's a Christ, Adam, they look alike, right? They're like twins, or like brothers. And it's a symbol of we are being created in God's image. You know, we look like God. And there's a beautiful harmony between God and Adam. And of course you can see other creations there, other animals and mountains, and you know, but this is the very important aspect of this icon. Christ creating Adam, they look alike. Beautiful harmony. But what happens?
God created a woman and messed everything.
That could be too. That was from Michael Scala.
They don't be following
That goes on records.
I'll sell it.
No, but what I want to say is that man, or Adam, you know, challenged God, right? And all of a sudden, when that happens, is there is no harmony. All of a sudden, you know, like if I tell you that Adam was called to the vocation of being a priest, what do I mean by that? He's losing that vocation being a priest for giving thanks to God, for God had created. You know, Adam loses his vocation as priest for the world, destined originally to make a Eucharist, to give thanks. You know, Eucharist means giving thanks, and Eucharistos in Greek. And of all the things as we are called to do by Christ, the new Adam. So when you listen to the Divine Liturgy, what do we pray? Or priest actually says that prayer, you know, I just see the person who was winking at me last lecture all the time.
It's just a creepy old guy.
During the Divine Liturgy, you listen to the liturgy, offering you your own from your own, always and everywhere. We give thanks all the time for what we've got, for what God created. And Adam was destined to do the thanksgiving. But all of a sudden he challenges God. And there is all of a sudden disharmony. Right? There's no harmony anymore. So, but anyhow, the Old Testament is full of prefigurations of resurrection. Prefigurations to Christ and to his death and resurrection. And if we think about Noah, saved mankind from the waters of flood. For Abraham, God spares Isaac and he gave his own son, who saves all the resurrection, fulfills the promise made to Abraham. Or Moses, so Moses, like Christ, Pharaoh, evil. Makes sense, right? Manna, or manna, it's the Eucharist. Or water from rock, it's a living water. Or cross, where Jacob blesses his children with the crossed arms. Or Jonah, 3 days and 3 nights in the whale belly. Elijah raising the son of a widow from Sarepta. Or Elisha raising the son of Shunammite woman. I hope I pronounced it correctly. But anyhow, in the New Testament, you know, when we hear in the Gospel, destroy this temple and in 3 days I'll raise it up. And Christ is talking about the temple of his body. Right? Raising of Jairus' daughter, or raising the son of the widow of Nain. And I would like to stop here for a little bit because I'd like to take the opportunity of, talking about that widow of Nain, that there is actually 2 processions at the gate meeting, at the town of Nain. And one procession is with Christ, with his followers, and they're entering the town. And then the other procession is that they're actually carrying the body of the young man out from the town. So where they're meeting at the gate, right? And there's a big turmoil, there's a big chaos. And what Christ does is something big no-no. Why? Because he's touching something unclean. He's touching the litter or beer. And back then it was huge no-no, because he became, if any other person did that, the person would become unclean. So he touches that litter, and he's raising the boy. And what I want to say here is there is a beautiful symbolism. Like, you come to Sunday Divine Liturgy, right? And then when you come to communion, Christ is coming out of a sanctuary and you're coming from the other side, right? And you're meeting Christ right at the gate, at the royal doors. You are allowing Christ to touch you. You're allowing Christ to touch your heart, to become clean again. If you're willing to do that, What you can do is just refuse it. But that's what Christ does. He is resurrecting us in our lives, giving us life again. He touches the unclean. But he has that power as God. He wasn't human, but as God, he has that power to touch and clean us, to make us clean. But anyhow, back to those prefigurations. Raising of Lazarus. There was another prefigure. I'm the resurrection and the life. Few days before Christ about to suffer, going into Jerusalem, he raises his dear friend, Lazarus. And he does it on the 4th day, right? At least the gospel says that, because they believe that in 3 days you can still resurrect the body. So on purpose, he does it on the 4th day. So then he if someone argues, no one can say anything now, because it was on the 4th day that he raises Lazarus. Lazarus is already stinky, the body stinks, It does, right? It's 4 days. It's not that his body was embalmed or something, Christ is not raising only Jairus' daughter, or Nain widow's son, or Lazarus, but all of us. And I'd like to talk, we're getting into that icon of the resurrection. I'd like to talk about some origins and sources as far as that icon. First of all, I'll be talking about this icon that we refer to as resurrection, but actually this icon is called the descent to Hades. And this composition was common at the Sinai and Cappadocia, between the 8th and 10th century. I'm talking about composition now. And some date this icon to the 7th and 8th century. There's some frescoes in Roman Forum, but what I'd like to say is, on that fresco, it responds to the images of the victorious Roman emperor drawing toward himself kneeling or prostrated people of conquered provinces or towns, and simply the images of the liberation of the defeated people wrenched from the tyranny of their leaders by the Roman emperor. So Christians used the same iconographic scheme for Christ descending into the Hades, or hell, whichever you like. Some illustrated texts from the 4th century are very helpful, or were an interesting source for the later elaboration of the icon of descent to hell. But there are some liturgical texts that were a good source for this icon, and some of them I'll read to you. If you heard about Saint Irenaeus of Lyon, he writes, "The Lord, the Holy One of Israel, remembered his departed ones asleep in their tombs, and he descended to them to bring the news of salvation, to raise them up and save them." Then the other text, the Odes of Solomon from the first half of the 2nd century, it says, "I opened the barred gates, I broke the iron locks, and the iron became red and turned to liquid before me. Nothing more was shut up, because on the door for every being. I went to free captives, they are mine, and I abandoned no one." And if you heard about St. Ephrem of Syria during the Lent or during the Great Fast, you read or you pray that beautiful prayer, "O Lord and Master of my life," and he wrote something like this, that's from the 4th century. "Glory to you who came down and plunged into the depths to seek Adam, whom you freed from Hades in order to lead him into paradise." Interestingly, no gospel mentions the descent into the Hades, but we hear a little bit from Peter and Paul when Peter says, I believe it's from the Acts of the Apostles, "He foresaw and spoke of the resurrection of Christ, that he was not abandoned to Hades, nor did his flesh see corruption." And then Paul, from the letter to Ephesians, says, he descended is he who also ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things." And then if you remember Holy Saturday Vespers, there are some beautiful texts, and some of those texts I'll be reading from the Stichera, Tone 8. "Today hell groans and cries aloud, my power has been destroyed. I accepted a mortal man as one of the dead. Yet I cannot keep him prisoner, and with him I shall lose all those over whom I ruled. I held in my power the dead from all the ages, but see, he's raising them all." And you probably remember 15 readings, which there is always fight over them because they're awfully long, right? And those readings were actually, we don't do them because we're stubborn Eastern Christians, you know. But the practical reason was that on Holy Saturday there was a baptism of neocatechumens going on. So while the baptism was going on, the readings were read. So 15 readings, and all these readings, if you listen to those readings, they're on the account of creation up to the 3rd day when light pierces darkness. Or another reading, Isaiah proclaiming the light of the Lord. The reading from Exodus, or about the Exodus of Israelites, or a sign of Jonah, 3 youths in the fiery furnace, and on and on and on. 15 readings. Just a funny story from Europe. When I was a seminarian and we were serving on Easter, going to the villages, and people always fought about shouldn't we take him those readings, and they gave a hard time to the priest like you do to Father Miron, you know, and, right? Just kidding. Thank God for him. So, but you know, the thing was that people were fighting, and then about a 90-year-old lady, she raised up and she says, I always remember taking 15 readings. I don't know what's the problem is. We'll take 15 readings. And it solved the problem, you know? And not that they're important, you know, they might be important, but you know, sometimes if we abbreviate it, I'm getting off now. So, anyway, it was funny, you know, it's good to have senior citizens or like, I don't want to say old people, you know, it's good to have 90+ people because they remember things, you know. And anyhow, back to those texts, you know, St. John Damascus, 8th century, I may be in hot water already. St. John Damascus, I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever, yet you did bring up my life from the pit. So, if we do the conclusion of all this, we come to the end, not the end of the lecture, but you know, we come to the coming of the Savior, right? And at this point, I'd like to describe this icon. I was trying to say some origins and sources, but the sign of Theophany, reverse transfiguration. Not on the top of the Mount Tabor, but at the center of the earth and the cosmos. Christ, radiant with light, now manifests towards the dead the solidarity he had with the living during his earthly life. Do you see that? Christ coming down towards the dead. As in the icons of transfiguration, the ascension and the dormition, a bright mandorla indicates the transformation of his body into one of glory. And that mandorla, you can see those circles. There are 3 circles, or concentric circles. Trying to find some good terms so you would understand. Blue or green, sometimes they're green, and it's a description of God or radiant darkness. Christ in gold or white vestments, and sign of divinity, like a bolt of lightning at night. Probably remember, you know, driving in like a storm. You know, it's dark, and all of a sudden there's a bolt of lightning, and you know, you see the whole country. It just, you know, that's what this icon or Christ should remind us, you know, that light pierces the darkness. You know, Christ springs forth in a movement that expresses his presence and power. As you can see, he's raising Adam by firmly grasping his wrist. Some icons, you can see on some icons that he's grasping only Adam's wrist. In this particular icon, he's grasping Adam's wrist and Eve's wrist. You know, but that's the icon that I could get into this format because many of the icons were so small. But if I had one of the older icons, Christ is grabbing Adam. And by saying this, is look what's happening. This is what happened at the creation, right? Adam is created in God's image. Actually, Adam represents the all humanity. And all of a sudden, because Adam challenges God, there is this harmony. Here, what Christ does He's pulling Adam back to life. He's recreating his image again. That's why we call this is old Adam. You will hear a lot about Christ being the new Adam, the new creation. He's pulling us out from darkness. And I'd like to tell you that these two icons, remember them as much as you can, because this is actually happening to all of us as Christians. We challenge God, we fall, we're being pulled from death to life. See what I mean? This is what the resurrection is all about. That's why we call it the descent into the Hades. Because what's happening is, Christ was divine, but he was human. And what's happening here is actually, he went so low. He got angry, he got spat on, he turned tables in the temple, he would curse a tree. But look what he did here. He went as low as hell for us to grab our wrist. And it's up to us if we're going to let him touch us or not, or if we're going to let him to grab that wrist and be pulled back to God or not. We can refuse and be in this harmony with God. But that's what he does for us. It is the personal resurrection. Take it this way. This is what's happening to our everyday lives. Christ is bringing us back to life. We have to cooperate somehow. I remember 2-3 years ago, one girl, she wrote a chat, chatting, not on the internet, not the internet, but, and she literally wrote, "I'm in big trouble." And I'm thinking, trouble is, everyone is in trouble. And we started chatting, and she started opening to me what's going on, what kind of problems she had, and then all of a sudden she was having questions about the church, how she remembered church, and many times I would write some points from the sermon, and then all of a sudden it would start making sense, But what I want to say is that she didn't give up on wanting to come back to reconcile with God or Christ. All I did was giving her a second chance, or or being there for her in order to, if I could, I would explain something or encourage, and that's it. But she was so hungry for coming back to Christ. Do you think it was a shame that she fell so down? It's not a shame to fall. It's a shame not to get up, right? And that's what she did. She would let Christ to grab her wrist and pull her back to life. And now she's married, she has a kid, living Christian life. Completely turn around of her wanting to come back to Christ. That personal resurrection. And, back to talking about this icon. This movement of the raising of the first man captures the whole content of redemption. The event is no physical, but fully spiritual. And I kind of jump forward a little bit, but that's how we should take this icon. Spiritually. Christ has large vestments, floating, see $1 million words, floating upward, not on this icon, but this, usually this section here is going like upward, and that is showing us that he's having the movement of going down, the descending movement. And the gates of Hades were not merely opened, but they were shattered along with the locks. They were completely shattered by him crushing those gates. So, and that's why you see, he's standing on the gates. Those are not like chocolate bars or something. They are gates being shattered. And look, all these locks and hinges and screws, whatever is there. Many times, not on this icon, but many times we see the devil being like all bind up. And usually you'll see the devil with the two faces. And as a result, they can never be shut, those doors, because they were shattered. The scroll in his left hand, not on this icon, but many icons, he's having this, or holding a scroll, symbolizes the preaching to the spirits of prison. And the cross, many times you will see him with a cross, but that's a sign of victory, which is pretty much the Western influence. So that was later on, somewhere in the 16th, 17th century. Then, back to that icon. Behind Adam are two ancestors of Christ. And you see the guy with no beard, or person, I shouldn't say guy. You understood, right? And then is Solomon, and his bearded father David. That's this gal here. And David was the founder of Jerusalem, who sings in Psalms, "Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice." Then we see John the Forerunner, or John the Baptist, beheaded in order that he might proclaim the coming of the Savior even unto Hades. Old Testament figures are usually to the right of Christ. And then the ones that came after him to the left, behind Eve. So behind Eve, those are usually New Testament figures. Eve has her hands shrouded, raising hands toward Christ. Not on this icon, but on some icons. Eve has her hands, like you don't see hands, you just see, that she has that icon there. The hands are shrouded. Alright, if you don't see her hands. And I've heard a comment, and I've heard a lot of comments, that it is because, she took the fruit, the apple, or, and the Bible actually doesn't really talk about apple, but she took that, fruit in her hands. So some people say so her hands are actually shrouded because he touched that, fruit. But the explanation is actually that in that era of proposing that icon, when women were approaching someone in a higher position, their hands were shrouded out of respect. So that's why, this is the explanation, why you see sometimes Eve with her hands shrouded. That she's approaching someone that is in a higher rank. That's why. And you see prophets who foretold his resurrection. Then Abel, I'm not sure, there's so many figures back there, but one of them is Abel, the first victim of injustice. Moses, representing the first covenant and the first Pascha. Paul standing behind Eve. And all the New Testament figures, that means the whole cosmos. Death, as I mentioned, You don't see it here on this icon, maybe on the one that that young lady has on her iPad. But death and chains under Christ, Satan sometimes depicted with two faces, and it's a sign of lack of unity and disintegration. When you see rocks, this icon, the entire cosmos that reflects the light rising from the depth of the earth, from the depths of the earth. And downward movement of Christ, that is, the descent bears within itself the beginning of an ascent that connects heaven and hell by a single flow of light. Does it make sense, what I just said? I'll say it one more time, just to make sure that I understand that, but I do. The descent bears within itself the beginning of an ascent that connects heaven and hell by a single flow of light. That means that Christ just didn't go to hell and stay there, but He pulled us out. And He does that all the time. Brings us back to life, back to the Father. In hell, Christ meets godless ones deprived of light. He, the Most High, descends as far as man can possibly fall. And that's what I was talking about a little bit earlier. He went so low as hell, to get us out. So no matter what kind of bad situation you might be, He'll be there for you, and He's there for you, and He'll pull you back if you will cooperate. If we'll cooperate. Be hungry for light. When we came here around 6 o'clock, 6:05, with a couple of ladies from church, and before the talk I drink a lot of water, right? I needed to go to the bathroom real quick. So I'm running there, and I'm thinking, I really need to go, and I'm trying to get the lights around. Like, dear God, where's that light? So, we should be even more hungry for that light. Not to be in darkness, but I had a little different situation because I needed to go, but, we're not comfortable in darkness, right? So, be hungry for a light. Maybe that's the only thing you'll remember on this lecture. Be hungry for a light. Before I'll still talk, but I may say a little joke in between because I'm always nervous about talking, at the talks. But here we go, and maybe you've heard this one, but there was a Sunday school or ACF. And the teacher was actually asking little children, what was the resurrection all about? And, there was a little boy and he raises his hand and he says, oh, I know, resurrection is all about, eating turkey and, giving thanks, and the teacher says, no, that's a Thanksgiving. That's not a resurrection. So then the little girl says, oh, I know. Resurrection is about when we have that Christmas tree and we give each other gifts and sing carols. And the teacher says, I don't think that's right. That's Christmas, but it's not a resurrection. And then the little boy, he raises his hand and says, oh, I know what resurrection is all about. He says, what? He says, well, the resurrection is about Christ dying on a cross, then being in the tomb, He's there for 3 days. And then on Sunday or on the third day, He comes out of the tomb, right? And she says, oh wow, that's perfect. That's what the resurrection is all about. Right? And he says, that's not all. He says, if he sees his shadow, he'll go back. 6 weeks more of winter, right? 6 more weeks of winter. See, I could not tell this joke in Slovakia because we don't have a Groundhog Day. But anyhow, isn't that February 2nd?
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyhow, the new creation, and God created Adam on the 6th day, right? And that was actually, it's a symbol of perfection of His work. That actually, that is the end of God's creative activity. The victim of the fall, Adam, is recreated on the 6th day of the week, the day of Christ's crucifixion. So there is a beautiful, parallel. And if you, I put a little note for myself, if you think maybe, I know we're in Easter season now and singing Christ is risen, but maybe let's go back again to Holy Week. Or, when we start Great Fast, we start on Monday. Our first day of Great Fast is Monday. We count 40 days, including Saturdays and Sundays, and we go all the way to the Saturday of Lazarus, right? So that's 40 days, and then we have that special week, Palm Sunday all the way through the resurrection. And we call this week, it's a special period called it's a flower, it's not clear, whatever it's called in English. But it's a special week, liturgically, but it's a special week for all of us. And if we take that parallel of the creation week, when you go back to the book of Genesis, and that Holy Week, there are some parallels, very interesting parallels. And take that very first day, the very first day of creation, God is entering the universe to begin His creation, right? And that first day of that Holy Week, God is entering the holy city of Jerusalem. There's a beautiful parallel. Palm Sunday. Then second day of the creation, back to Genesis. Right? Creating air and water, meant for life. The second day of Holy Week, Monday. Christ from the Gospels, now I'm talking. Christ cursing the fig tree and cleansing the temple. And it's a symbol of, people made it unfruitful and impure. So He's trying to destroy that impure and unfruitful. On the second day when He creates air and water meant for life, He's getting rid of something unfruitful and impure. The third day of creation week, He had drawn mountains out of the sea, or separated the dry land from the waters. And the third day of Holy Week, we can talk about a great sermon on the Mount of Olives. Jerusalem must be first destroyed. There is another beautiful parallel. On the fourth day, He formed sun, moon, stars, and heaven. Stars of heaven. And then in the Holy Week, He who was the true light must become darkness. In the new world, there would never be night again. So there's a beautiful parallel. Piercing the light through the darkness. The fifth day, creation of animals that have blood or life in it. The fifth day of the Holy Week, There's the perfect lamb about to be sacrificed, Holy Thursday. Then day 6, the peak of his creation. He's creating Adam, that icon that I just talked about. And then on Holy Friday or Good Friday, think about that recreation again. You know, he created Adam on that 6th day, but recreating man, new Adam, by doing that on the cross. What happened on the 6th day? He created Adam, and Eve, they used that fruit from the tree, from the wood. He is actually saving us on the wood again, the wood of the cross. Right? Think about that Good Friday in this way. And then on the 7th day, God rested from his creation. Well, what do we do on Holy Saturday? God is resting in the tomb, actually, right? And then there's that 8th day. It's a new day. Actually, it's the first day of the week, again, that we call it resurrection. To get that in my notes. But, the number 7, on the 7th day, Creator rested, which we call Sabbath, or the Jews call it Sabbath. Holy Saturday for the Eastern or Orthodox Christians, right? And the liturgy centered on descending to Hades on that 7th day. That's that icon that I just talked about. Descending to Hades. Think about that icon on Holy Saturday. And the number 7 is the image of the fullness of the present time, initiating departure from that time. It opens up in the 8th day, the day of resurrection that opens up a new era, a new time. When we think about Pentecostalian, 7 weeks, here's number 7. Right? 7 times 7 is 49. And Pentecost is that new day again, the 50th day. Resurrection, Ascension, and Pentecost leads us to that 8th day, the day that never ends. Father, through the Spirit, raises the Son, who ascends to the Father in order to send the Holy Spirit. So Sunday, yet 8th day in Russian, it's called the Resurrection or Воскресение. In Greek, it's called Kyriake Hemena, the day of the Lord, and it's a unique day, Pascha. Having appeared at the end of the first creation, man stands at the beginning, at the second, since the world is transfigured through him. So man is actually standing at the first creation, and now he's the new creation. He's starting the new creation with man. The old creation, he ended up with man. The new creation, he starts with man. On that Good Friday or Holy Friday. While the first creation marks the beginning of time, the second enables one to depart from it and attain to the light of the never-setting sun. Make sense? Hopefully. So look forward to the 8th day. The day that never ends. And that's how we should take the resurrection. You know, it's always a new day. You know, the day that never ends. Never setting sun. There are some other icons, the resurrection icons. talk about the myrrh-bearing women icon. And here, this is the most ancient depiction of Pascha. It's from about 230 after Christ. That was from Syria, not this particular one, but there was a fresco in Syria, and it actually is precise moment of the history. The empty tomb, source of life for early Christians. You see that empty tomb here, right? Joseph, you know the story, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, they had released the corpse. They put it in the tomb. Actually, the Troparion says that on the Holy Shroud around. On that icon, the rocks that reflect the diffused light of the tomb. Section of the walls of Jerusalem, not on this icon, but many of the icon of the myrrh-bearing women. There are some sections of the city of Jerusalem. Women bearing jars full of spices. And there is empty tomb with the shrouds and rolled up napkin. Here what I would like to say is there was always, I think it's in the John's Gospel, the shroud that Jesus was wrapped in was actually a separate piece from the shroud that was put on his face. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So, what I want to say is, and I know that I used it in the sermon one time, but it was a very interesting story about what the Jewish tradition was when the young men were growing up and when they were dining or eating at the table, when they folded the napkin neatly and left the table, that meant that they're coming back. So they would not dare to take the food from the table. That's just a sign of it. If they just put the napkin in whatever way and throw it, they were done eating. That napkin that was covering Christ's head was neatly put. That's what the gospel says on the side. It's a beautiful sign of I'm coming back. You know what I mean? There's a connection from the Jewish tradition. I am coming back. I'll be back. One of the two angels with outstretched wings. On this icon you see just one angel, but some icons we have two angels with outstretched wings. And what I want to say here is, if you remember the story from the book of Exodus. Yeah, the Ark of the Covenant. That's what I want to talk about. Yeah, but that's the book of the Exodus. And actually God was telling Moses that you will build the ark, or like the box kind of looking thing, so many feet, or wide, tall, you'll put a lid on top, you'll put the tablets of the law in it and piece of manna, and it will be place where I'll be dwelling. It will be called the meeting place. And remember that he told him to put two cherubs on the top with outstretched wings, so that there would be like almost touching, right? So that was the place for God. It was the meeting place between Israelites and God. Right? Here, it's a beautiful symbol of, I know we see only one angel, but many icons have two angels here. At the tomb, at that box, or the Ark of the Covenant that is empty already, with outstretched wings. But the symbol of this is, and I said like a couple of minutes ago, empty tomb was the greatest message for early Christians. Why? Because Christ was facing Adam already. Christ and Adam are face to face. That's what is the greatest message of the resurrection. Christ is doing the action. He's not only like, yeah, I've been raised. Whatever, oh, are you in the pit? That's okay. No, he's coming to get us. I'm being a little sarcastic here, but he does that for us in our everyday lives. This is the greatest message. Empty tomb. Because we know what Christ does, pulling us back to life. Many icons you see, a couple of women, 3 women, 6 women, it all depends. Even the evangelists are talking about, the numbers there. But they were witnesses too. And going back a couple of thousand years ago, to be a witness, there had to be 2 people at least. At least 2 people. And believe it or not women. Women could not bring the message. It's hard to swallow that in this world or in this society, but that's how it was. And maybe that's why we're wondering why the apostles did not believe the women. Don't blame the apostles. It was the law or the tradition not to believe a woman. Are you witness? No, I don't believe a woman. And angel, he's telling them, go ahead and tell the disciples. He's ready to go ahead and meet with you. But they were bewildered and trembling, right? They were afraid. So for a while they were hiding, yes. But usually there are 3 women, Mary Magdalene, Mary Mother of James, and so on. Then St. Gregory Palamas, he says that the Mother of God, the Theotokos, was one of the first to hear about the resurrection. So she could be the part of those 6. There are 6. And the angels are actually, if you can notice, that the beauty and transcendent world, clothes and napkins, is brilliant as dazzling as angels. So that, usually when the iconographer paints his icon, the napkin or the shroud are as dazzling as the angels' clothes. Let me get back here to this picture. And this is not to be like rude or bad. It's a beautiful piece of work. But I would like to tell you something now, that the depiction of Christ coming out of the tomb, that there are some defects in this tradition. And I'll tell you why. There's at least 3 ways that they're wrong. When angel comes to roll away the stone, it is not so that Christ might come out, but rather to show that the tomb is empty. You got that?
That's the Western Church.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, the Western icon of the resurrection. And then the second defect is that Christ would not be coming out of the tomb, since having descended into Hades, he ascends to the Father, followed by the captives he has freed. And then the third one is the soldiers are struck with fear at the sight of the angel and not of the risen one. Again, this is a beautiful piece of work, no doubt about it. But there are some defects with it. And what I'd like to say about this icon of the sand in the Hades is there is some dogmatic truth in it. And the sand of the Hades icon highlights not an individual historical event, the bodily resurrection of the Savior, if you will, nor a historical moment, the Savior's exit from the tomb, but rather the dogma of abolition of Hades and death, as well as the resurrection of humanity. The resurrection of Christ is majestic, universal event and cosmic event. Christ does not come out of the tomb, but out from among the dead. That's from the Greek word eknekron. From among the dead. That's the important saying. He comes out from among the dead. He's pulling us back to the Father. There are, of course, some other icons of the resurrection. I mentioned that the icon of Lazarus that happened before the resurrection of Christ. Couple other icons. There is Mary Magdalene meeting Christ. There may be a fresco dating to the 4th century that Mary was actually meeting Christ. But this one is from, I think, late 16th century. And it's called Appearance to Mary Magdalene. And Mary, in the 4th century icon, Mary is actually talking to the angel, not to Christ. But here, she's about to touch Christ, and that's, when I was reading some stuff about it, there says that this icon represents the Western desire to see and touch. But it's a late production, 16th, 17th century. I hope I'm correct on that. Would you guess what icon this is? It's a doubting Thomas. Another icon for the sign of resurrection. And you know the story, right? Doubting Thomas. We all have doubts. So let's not blame Thomas. Thomas was actually the one who was very courageous. And he actually was ready to die with Christ, But for whatever reason, he was late there after his resurrection. And he wanted to, probe his fingers in the nail prints, But what I want to say, we have doubts, but it's good to have doubts. What I want you to do, think about the resurrection the way I described, and the icon is telling us we are allowed to have doubts. We are allowed to fall as low as we possibly can. But let ourselves to be grabbed or grasped or be pulled up back to the Father. So that's what the resurrection is all about. Anyhow, I think I'm going to end it here. So if you have any questions, go ahead. Ask. They're simple ones.
Does anybody know when that icon was made? Like in which century and possibly who did it? Because all those ideas that they captured on that icon are so deep.
Yeah, well, as we talk about the descent into Hades,
Yeah.
as I said, the origins were the first dating, or the composition dates the 8th to 9th century.
Okay,
So that's the first idea of, freeing captives people from slavery, all right? So that's the idea. As you can see, this icon has nothing to do with the history or historical, to catch the historical moment. Why? Because you have Christ crushing the gates, all of a sudden you have Adam.
yeah,
We're going way back to the beginning of the world. Then you have David and Solomon. Then we're talking about, Eve, and then New Testament figures.
yeah.
I think,
It's very-
historically, this is like not at one, not at one picture. It doesn't make sense. That's why I said, we have to take this picture spiritual, The icon represents the whole cosmos,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? And the resurrection, being brought back to life from darkness. So this icon is very spiritual, Who did it later on, what schools or what centuries, there's so many of them. This is the 20th century, most likely, just looking at the calligraphy,
Oh, yeah.
But this is actually, catching the historical moment, the myrrh-bearing women, an empty tomb, historically, that's the icon that even the Gospels talk about. And again, beautiful message. There could be nothing better than empty tomb. Because why? What did I say? Empty tomb, Christ is facing Adam. And Adam represents all humanity. That means that Christ is facing all of us to bring us back to life, right?